To begin, we import useState from React. useState is a hook that lets you add React state to function components. Here, we define a functional component named pageComponent and destructure the initial data prop that will be provided by getStaticProps. Inside the component, we initialize the state with the initial data using the useState hook. This will allow our component to maintain its own state based on the initial data. We start the return statement of our function, which will output our JSX. In this case, we wrap our content with a div element. We render the child component within our page component and pass the data state as a prop to the child component. Finally, we close the div tag and the return statement. Remember that in JSX, every tag must be closed for the code to work correctly. Now, we define a child component that receives the data prop from its parent. We create a return statement that begins with a div wrapper for the child component's content. We use the map function to iterate over the data array. For each item, we return a paragraph with a unique key attribute and display the item's title. We conclude the return statement and the child component itself by closing the div tag. Now, let's define the getStaticProps function. This function retrieves data at build time. Inside getStaticProps, we perform an asynchronous fetch request to an API to retrieve our data. After receiving the response, we parse it as JSON, which will give us the actual data to pass to our page component. Once we have our data, we return an object with a props key that contains another object. This object maps initial data to our fetched data, which Next.js will then provide as props to our page component. We close the getStaticProps function here, finalizing the data fetching process for our static generation.